Senator from Florida.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that I be allowed to speak as if in morning business.
Objection.
Mr. President, we're entering tomorrow. The House will announce its plan for tax reform. It's a starting point. I doubt everybody here will agree with everything that's in it, and I imagine we'll find a lot of good in it, and that'll be a good starting point for this debate. But it actually is about a broader topic that I hope will be a part of our conversation about tax reform, because it hasn't been enough of a part about our national discourse over the last 20 years. You know, if you think about the history of this country, one of the things that truly distinguishes us is not that we have rich people. Every country in the world has rich people. We have an extraordinary amount of success and earned success in this country, and we celebrate it. We don't criticize it, but every society in the world has rich people. Sadly, we're also not the only country that has people that are poor, that are struggling, and that is something that challenges our principles as a nation founded on the idea of equal opportunity to life and liberty and to pursue happiness. But the one thing that really distinguishes America is that by and large, the overwhelming number of Americans do not consider themselves either rich or poor. They consider themselves hardworking people, and you can come up with any term you want, whether it's middle class or working class. But these are basically people that work hard every single day to provide not just a better life for themselves, be able to retire with dignity, leave their children better off than themselves. They take pride in that. The values that they value are not how much money they make or how many things they own. It isn't even the title of their job. They value the dignity that comes from the work that they do, and more importantly, they value what it allows them to do. And it's not complicated things. It allows them to own a home in a neighborhood that's safe, not a mansion, but a home, and you see that every weekend. The people that spend countless hours to constantly keep up that home, they take great pride in it. They take great pride in the family and the achievement of their children. They take great pride in the churches and the synagogues and the religious organizations, the voluntary groups they belong to. This has been the fundamental core of our country. And that doesn't mean that others that don't fit that profile are not important to the country as well. But this has distinguished us because most countries in the world don't really have that. Most societies in human history, you're either rich or you're poor. There was a lot of poor people and a handful of people in which all the wealth was concentrated in. And that sort of dynamic is what separated us from the rest of the nations on earth, and to this day in many ways still does. It's something I talk about not because I read about it or because I saw a documentary last weekend, but because in many ways I lived it. My parents were that. Neither one had much of an advanced education. I don't know how far my dad went in school, probably not beyond what we would consider third or fourth grade. My mom, perhaps not much more than that. They actually came to this country, didn't barely speak any English when they arrived, and they had to struggle to learn it, but they did. And they ended up being a bartender and a maid. The people that have known me or have heard me speak before know that story, because it's one I tell, not because I want you to know more about me, but because I want you to understand sort of what motivates me in public policy. And even though my dad basically worked in the service sector his entire life, and my mother did as well, they owned a home. And they retired with dignity. All four of their kids went to college. And that was possible through a combination of things. Jobs that paid enough, and the ability to have programs like Social Security and Medicare that allowed them to retire with dignity, programs they paid into all those years that they were working. The reason why I raise it is because people who fit that profile have been hurt more than anyone else over the last 15 to 20 years. And it's not necessarily anybody's fault. The economy has changed. So, for example, the jobs that my parents once did, they don't pay nearly enough to afford today what they afforded back then. As a bartender and a maid today, if my parents were doing that now, I'm not sure what house they would buy in Miami-Dade County where I live, but I'm not sure they'd be able to buy one anywhere near where we live now, not because our neighborhood is some fancy place, but because everything costs so much compared to how much those jobs pay. So everything costs more, the jobs aren't paying enough. And then they got hit by this, so that's just the nature of changes in our economy. Many of those people lost their jobs altogether. The industry they were once in vanished. It went to another country, or machines took your place, or they just don't need as many people as they used to because they're able to do more with less employees. Then they got hit with this recession, and it really hit them bad. Maybe it wiped out their retirement savings, it cut in half the value of their home, their most important investment that they had, and they haven't even, to this day, haven't fully recovered. And then you add to all that the idea that in American politics today, we spend an extraordinary amount of time debating how we can help everybody else except for them. And I don't think that we do that on purpose or that people around here don't care about people like that. I don't know why it happened. I'm just telling you that it has. And the result is somewhat a little bit of resentment, but certainly a lot of sense of isolation and the notion and belief that they've been left behind. And they're upset about it. And they have a right to be. And it's not just about money, and it's not just about economics. It's about the values of hard work and dignity and responsibility and doing what you need to do to be a good citizen of this country and contribute to its future, but also do what you need to do to raise your family and instill in them the values that you think are important. I think it would be a terrible mistake to enter tax reform, perhaps one of the most meaningful public policy debates we have had in this city, certainly in the time I've been here, and perhaps in the better part of 2 to 3 decades in terms of our economy, without in any way talking about what tax reform means for the millions of Americans that I just described. Now, the one thing it should mean is that those jobs that have left, some of them should be able to come back because, frankly, our own policies have forced some of those jobs to go somewhere else. When other countries are making it easier to open up factories and create jobs over there instead of over here, you're going to lose some of those jobs. I'm not saying all of them are the result of that, but a lot of them were. And if we have tax policies, as we do, that do not allow us to compete and create those jobs here, we have to reverse that. And tax reform should be about that. But it also has to be about working Americans. Okay? Not Americans that are rich and can hire fancy accountants and lawyers and even lobbyists to help them create special tax statuses. But also I'm not talking about Americans that are dependent on a government program. And again, I'm not talking about disability. I'm not talking about Medicare, Social Security, programs they paid into. I'm talking about programs that assist anti-poverty programs, a whole other topic that we should talk about one day, because some of them aren't working the way that we hope they would in terms of helping people escape poverty. I'm talking about people that work and they make just enough to not qualify for any of that stuff, but not nearly enough to be able to afford the cost of living. And that's just them. You add to that the cost of raising those children. It's more expensive to raise kids today than ever before, and the cost keeps growing, and the paychecks aren't keeping pace. There is nothing we can do in tax reform by itself that solves all of those problems, but there is no way we can do tax reform without addressing the millions of Americans who feel like every time there's a debate in Washington, it's about helping everybody else except for them. So take, for example, the issue of the child tax credit, which is called the child tax credit, but it really is about helping families, parents and children. Take, for example, a married couple with 2 children. Let's say one of them works at a warehouse and the other one is a home health aide. These are not unusual jobs to find in the economy. And let's say, based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, their annual income combined is going to be around $55,000 a year. Okay, depending on where you live, that's not a lot of money probably anywhere in the country. It certainly isn't a lot of money where I'm standing now or where I live in Miami. If we don't do anything, if we do the whole framework on tax reform, but do nothing on the child tax credit and leave it as is, that couple paying $55,000, making $55,000 a year with 2 children, if we do nothing, they're going to have a tax increase of $738. I cannot imagine a single person here voting for a tax reform package that does nothing on the child tax credit and thereby raises taxes on a couple making $55,000 a year with 2 children by a penny, not to mention $700 a year. Now, what if we do a little less, like some people are suggesting? Let's just raise the tax credit to $500, but let's not make it refundable against payroll tax. They'll get a tax cut of about $263. And when you compare that to some of the tax cuts you're going to see in other parts of this tax reform, I would say that's not nearly enough. It's certainly not enough to make a difference. But what if you do this? What if you double the value from $1,000 to $2,000 of the tax credit and you make it refundable towards payroll tax? That couple with those 2 children will have a tax cut of $1,263. Now that doesn't solve all their problems, but it makes a difference. I can give you other examples. Let me use, there's others we'll get to in the years to come, in the weeks to come and days to come, but let's just take a family like the one I grew up in, okay? A bartender and a maid. The median income of the bartender and the maid is about $42,000, $43,000 a year. They have 3 children. Without anything in the child tax credit, we just leave it the way it is and do the framework, they're going to pay $1,276 more in taxes. Can you imagine? A tax reform plan that raises taxes on a bartender and a maid with three children making $42,000, $43,000 a year, and it raises their taxes by almost $1,300 a year. Who here is going to vote for that? I dare you. You won't. And actually, I don't dare you. I don't want you to vote for that. And that's not what we're going to do. So let's just do this symbolic thing. Raise it $500, but make it non-refundable. They'll get a tax cut of about the same, $233. You might as well keep it, because they're not going to make a difference. But what if we doubled the value of the child tax credit and made it refundable towards payroll tax? Then their tax cut is $1,733. That's a tax cut. And that's the direction we have to go. And I've heard some people say, well, we shouldn't make it refundable to payroll tax because that's just more people that aren't paying anything in taxes. They're talking about the income tax. Let me tell you something. That's the way people here talk and think. That's the way economists think. That's the way accountants might think. But for people that work and get a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks, when they get that paycheck, it shows that money came out of their paycheck. And it doesn't matter if that money went into income tax or payroll tax. That's money they earned that you took away using the power of government. They are paying taxes. Whether they are paying income tax or payroll tax, they are paying taxes. And if you want to help people who are working but don't make enough, then the only way to do, and they're trying to raise a family, the child tax credit is the best way to do it. And so as we move forward, I truly hope that some of these voices I hear treating the child tax credit as some sort of welfare program or giveaway or gimmick will reconsider that attitude. We'll reconsider that attitude. Because the child tax credit only applies to families that are working, that make less than a certain amount of money, and that are raising children, our future taxpayers. And I'm going to ask this: if our tax code does not help working families, given all the other challenges they face, how that's inexcusable. How can we pass a tax reform that is loaded up on how we're going to help the business sector? And it should, because it creates jobs and it will help have higher pay down the road. How can we have spending programs that spend billions upon billions of dollars to help the poor, but do nothing for the backbone of our economy, the one thing we all say we take extraordinary pride in, the working class, the working people of this country? There is no way we can have a tax plan that doesn't do those things. No way. And if we do and head in that direction, that will convince millions of Americans that they were right all along, that the people in charge in this country, in both parties, and the people who advise them don't care about, look down on, and have no ideas about what life is like for people like them, who work hard every day, who seek nothing from the government other than a fair chance. That's all they want. And all I'm advocating for is that we allow them to keep more of their own money so they can provide for their families and the better future and rebuild those working class values and that working class backbone that I believe is what's made America so great. And so I look forward to continuing to work in this direction. We better do something real, and we better do it right. Otherwise, I don't know how you pass tax reform. I'm hopeful that's where we're headed. I know we still have some work to do. And I know tomorrow's only a starting point. But I'll repeat once again, any tax plan that doesn't cut taxes on working families with children is not one worth supporting. And so that I hope that that's the direction we will move in. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.